Hello, in this video I'll be playing through episode 9 of Interrogation You Will Be Deceived. Illustrating here can get a confession and win the episode, hopefully without having to resort to any sort of enhanced interrogation techniques. This video is intended to help you if you're stuck, but I strongly suggest you stop the video once you feel you have what you need to finish the conversational puzzle on your own, so that you don't ruin your experience of the game. There are many ways to finish an episode and I will be showing you only one of them, so try to get back in the game and discover your own. Let's start with the case before us. So before we start episode 9, we are given this choice of which suspects to bring. We can only bring 2 out of these 4 suspects. There are many hints throughout the game that help you make this decision. This might seem like a random decision at first, but there are hints throughout the game as to which of these you should choose. I'm gonna tell you right now, there are certain combinations that you just can't win, right? So for example, if you read the newspapers that are periodically offered to you, if you talk to some of the people that you get from the missions, they might give you certain hints, but they're very nuanced and you have to be careful, right? So I'm going to give you one very important hint. In order to finish episode 9, you have to have either Annabelle or Damascus Reed in your choice. You can have any combination you want as long as one of the suspects you bring is either Annabelle or Damascus Reed, or just, both. So one of these 2 people has to be the ones you bring in, right? Annabelle is a reputed sociology professor and Damascus Reed is a well-known entrepreneur. So let's bring these 2 in. Again, you can bring other combinations as long as one of them is brought in, right? One of them is required. So here's what you need to do to win episode 9. Let's bring them in. And for this playthrough, I'll focus on Damascus. And here's another interesting aspect with episode 9. You have to be careful in this episode to manage both your empathy and your fear at the same time. You will need both of these stats in different moments in the game in order to finish the episode, right? Keep in mind, you have nothing on these people. You have just a hunch that one of them might be involved with the Liberation Front. And the case file tells you just that, right? You basically had this tip, right? Of these 4 people booking a flight. And this is a suspicion you have. But these people probably know you have nothing solid on them. So you have to make them trust you. And you have to intimidate them so that they know they're in trouble, right? You have to convince them that they're in trouble, and then they have to trust you enough that you can get them out of trouble, right? That's the sort of approach you need to have, right? First of all, with Damascus, I will focus on making him trust me. So this is what we'll try to do. We will try to be polite with him, and you have to be very careful. Wherever you have these sort of choices, you have to be very careful which one you pick. It will influence these stats here, and you have to pick them right strategically. Okay, so first of all, let's be polite to him. Although he shakes his head and he's outraged, we see his empathy rising. We will raise his empathy with even more. Yes, the truth is nuanced. This is why I'm here to ask just a few questions. And he says he doesn't know why we're taking a swing at him. We must have been manipulated. Well, perhaps, but let's start. Alright? So what we want to do is go through these options carefully, right? And keep an eye on the red question, seeing if it changes at any point. That might give us a hint that we can now press him a bit, right? The first thing we want to know is all of these 4 people, there's a lawyer, a very important law shark, coming to defend all of them. So let's talk to him about that. How come 2 people that don't know each other have the same lawyer? He says he wasn't even aware that he has a lawyer. Well, let's just try to be polite. It's his right to have a lawyer. His empathy is rising up even more. But he doesn't know. He basically says he doesn't know. Maybe Anaba called the lawyer, maybe not. He's not willing to tell us anything at this point. But if we try to push him a bit more, he admits that, yeah, after all, he called the man. Let's try to ask him why he tried lying to us. First rule we all learn is not to talk to the cops. Well, I guess that might be true in your case. Let's try to find out why he contacted this lawyer to represent everyone, all the suspects we brought in. And he says, because you've pulled us out of our plane with no warrant, more lawsuits are better than one. So he is claiming that this is just a scheme he's pulling to have a stronger defense in case we're trying to abuse our power in any way. Well, let's try to calm him down, saying that, yeah, that sounds smart. The city hall's money anyway, what do I care? He says, finally a public servant that understands how the state works. Okay. So at this point, our empathy with him is pretty high. He thinks we're cool, we're the cool cop. Let's see what he thinks about this. He says, I can't trust you as far as I can throw you. Let's see if he's willing to talk to us anyway. And he says, we're someone who can be reasonable and cool-headed. This is because we have a high empathy with him. He says he won't confess shit, but let's say he can give us some advice. What sort of advice? He's run international operations, had to establish networks, motivate people, recruit. I've done it all. All of these things sound like the sort of things a terrorist leader would have to do. So let's say, okay, let's see what sort of advice he can give us. And here we have a very long list of questions we can ask him to try to understand how a liberation front would work. Again, he's not confessing to anything, he's just giving us theoretical advice, right? So we can go through these conversations with him and try to understand, if he were to be a liberation front leader, how would he run things? Now, we've made him discuss with us on a theoretical level. If he were to be a leader, he's willing to discuss with us in theoretical terms, because he doesn't feel very afraid at this point. He might think we have nothing against him, but he trusts us enough to have at least to give us something, right? So he's giving us this theoretical conversation, but he doesn't feel threatened enough. So at this point, we need to raise his fear so that he actually feels pressured to giving us more, right? He needs to feel threatened. You can always stop the recorder and give him some physical threats if that's what you need, but I suggest you don't do that. So I suggest you read through all of these conversations. These will be very useful in the next episode. It's very important that you understand how the Liberation Front might work. So in questions like these now, we need to pick the options that will raise his fear, right? We want to put pressure on him, so we have to read perhaps through his file, get a view on this person, get a read on this person, and see what might actually make him feel threatened. For example, when asked how does an organization like a violent one fund itself, he says they don't have a revenue source, they haven't been robbing banks, ain't selling drugs, so that means someone must be funding them. And we can make a very smart assumption, for example, saying that in return, if someone were to fund them, then the Liberation Front might be harming their competitors, right? And he says he doesn't think so, but we can see his heart rate spiking over there. Now, what we want to know is, how is the Liberation Front led? He says they have their hands in many pies and handle many things at once. They must have a small core of dedicated people pulling the strings. Interesting. How many of them? Probably just an administrative board. He says so. It would have to be uneven, so 3, 5, 7, something like that, but small enough for quick decisions. How would the hierarchy look between these leaders? He says he would probably not be an official hierarchy between these leaders, as to not offend anyone's ego. What if a number of the leaders were to leave? Then the others would run things. But, each leader might try to pull the organization in different directions, so let's tell him that. And he says that yes, this may be true, especially if they don't trust the ones left to do good work. So at this point, we planted the seed of doubt in his mind. If he is a Liberation Front leader, we now have given him a reason for concern, because we might not put him in jail. We might put other leaders in jail, or if we put just him in jail, then the other leaders of the Liberation Front will be able to do with it as they please, against perhaps Damascus Reed's interests. So let's try to talk about some other things with him to put some more pressure on him. Let's discuss his background as a businessman, and let's see how one with his background, a rich entrepreneur, ends up being the leader of a terrorist organization. He says that's just some random theory we have, but you know, a person in his position could use the Liberation Front as a means to push for example, a breakdown of laws and regulations that he might feel held back by. And yes, his fear has risen because, you know, he might be feeling that we're getting on to him, but he tells us, you know what, bribes have suddenly stopped working. So, you know, he admits to the fact that he's more than willing to corrupt or to use, in his opinion, the corrupt government for his own ends. So this is a very incriminating statement in my point of view. Finally, let's go back and discuss the Liberation Front with him again for a minute. Let's see what is his opinion on the front. He says that as long as they don't disrupt his operation, he doesn't care. What does he agree with their means? He says he likes their PR, but he doesn't agree with their violent behavior. So he likes the way they message themselves, but we know the Liberation Front has many messages. Let's see what he believes about the down with the rich messages. He says it saddens him. Again, his heart rate is spiking. He hopes that they will understand that the concept of class warfare is absurd. Let's see if he agrees with their motives. He says they haven't assumed any demands or even objectives. Well, we know that's not exactly true. They have an assumed objective of fighting against the status quo in all its ways, but let's try to scare him with that, not right? Let's say that just means they will fight aimlessly, destroying everything people like you have built, especially if we put you in jail, Mr. Reed. And he says, let's just hope you stop them before that happens. He's trying to deceive us, perhaps. So at this point, we have a very high empathy and very high fear with him. Let's try to see if he's willing to confess to us. And he says he can't give us what we want. That's not how this works. We can tell him that he can either go to prison and let the Liberation Front be stolen from him, or he can give us something we can use. And he says, again, he can't give us what we want, but he's willing to make a deal with us. He'll give us 2 other names of the people we should really talk to, potential other leaders of the front. So we've convinced him that if we just put him in jail, the other two might pervert the cause. So he doesn't really trust the other 2. So that will be a very useful information for the next episode. But until then, thank you very much for watching. And I hope you find other interesting ways of finishing this episode. Goodbye.